In order to determine if weather was a factor in the Adamair crash, investigators need a more complete picture of what happened on board the flight. They want to know everything the crew did and said from the time they discovered that they were off course to the time they hit the water. To do this, they combine the data from the two black boxes to create a computer simulation of the flight.
That gave us very close to the possibility of what really happened with the aircraft.
Investigators return to Jakarta to study the simulation.
The weather in my Kilo Sierras isn't good.
This is crazy! We're going to get lost if it stays like this.
They can see that throughout most of the flight, the computer was navigating the plane. But since the flight computer was sending the plane off course, the captain decided to navigate the plane himself.
Okay, put the IRS in attitude.
Co-pilot Susanto switched the navigation system to a mode that would keep the plane flying straight and level. Captain Widodo could now change his course.
This is where they switch from nav to attitude.
Switching from one mode to the other forces some computerized gauges to temporarily go blank while they reset. One is the ADI, or Artificial Horizon, which tells the crew if the plane is flying level.
ADI goes off and stays off.
There was also another much more serious consequence to the switch.
That's where the plane starts its right roll.
The autopilot disengaged when they consciously selected from the nav mode to the attitude mode, and then the aircraft commenced an almost imperceptible roll to the right of around about 1 degree per second.
The captain missed a crucial step when he switched his flight computer from one mode to the other.
Quick reference handbook, please.
He should have flown his plane straight and level while the computer adjusted to the new setting.
Maintain straight and level, constant airspeed flight until attitude displays recover. Approximately 30 seconds. It's in the manual.
Any pilot who is trained and qualified on the Boeing 737-400 is regarded to have a sufficient knowledge that whenever they switch the nav mode to attitude, they have to maintain wings level for 30 seconds.
But neither of the pilots did that. It's an oversight with grave consequences. Without that step, the autopilot disengages completely. The flight computer did send out a warning when that happened, but the warning was ignored. The crew didn't seem to notice that the autopilot was no longer flying the plane. And it only took seconds for that to become a very serious problem. The data tells investigators that this plane had a natural tendency to roll to the right. Old planes, like old cars, don't always go straight. Throughout the flight, the autopilot compensated for that by raising the aileron on the plane's left wing. An aileron is a movable flap on the wing that controls how much the plane rolls to the left and right. But once the autopilot disengaged, it stopped compensating and the ailerons went back to a neutral position. That allowed the plane to revert to its tendency to roll to the right.
And they don't even notice.
At this point, the plane was rolling at a rate of 1 degree per second. Focused on their faulty navigation system, and with thick clouds obscuring the horizon, the pilots had no idea that their plane was dipping. It's not uncommon for pilots to get disoriented in this way.
Your body will start to fool you. Your senses will start sending you false information or false senses. You might think that you are actually going straight and level, while you're actually rolling slowly to the right or to the left.
The 737 is programmed to issue a warning when it rolls past 35 degrees.
Bank angle, bank angle, bank angle.
The flight data recorder shows investigators that in response to that alert, Captain Widodo did attempt to level the plane.
They get an oral warning from the airplane that says, hey, bank angle, bank angle. And at that point, they made some small inputs to the controls, but they didn't fly the airplane.
Believing that the autopilot would keep the plane level, Widodo soon turned his attention back to the problematic IRS.
When the pilot engrossed with troubleshooting of the IRS, their ability to pay attention for the other tasks is reduced. Further, these IRS anomalies has become the only priority at the moment.
Usually you would say one pilot deals with the system issue, the other pilot flies the airplane. They were both dealing with this system issue and totally focused on the issue, so they never saw what was happening.
This is not the first accident involving what we would call spatial disorientation.
It was almost 3 years earlier to the day that another flight, Flash Airlines 604, taking off over the Red Sea, had a similar fate.
See what the aircraft just did?
Distracted by a malfunctioning component in the cockpit, the captain may have become disoriented.
Autopilot! Autopilot!
Like the Adam Air flight, the captain's attention was focused on his flight computer. And like the Adam Air flight, his plane began rolling dangerously to the right. Investigators concluded that without any external references, the captain simply couldn't tell that his plane was falling from the sky.
Tragically, just because there is an inertial reference system failure, or let's say in another accident there might be an engine failure, does not mean that an aircraft has to crash.
It's 60 degrees now and there's no attempt at recovery.
Don't turn it! This is our heading! Pull out! Pull out!
Investigators can see that when Captain Widodo does take action, he makes the situation much worse. With his plane still banked drastically to the right, Captain Widodo should have leveled his wings and then pulled his nose up. He did the opposite. He began pulling back on his control column before his wings were level. That forced the plane into a tight spiral dive.
Basically, it rolled, and it just kept rolling until it almost went inverted and just kind of fell out of the sky once it got to a point where it wasn't flying like a normal airplane should.
The aircraft was descending at nearly 900 kilometres an hour at a vertical speed at times reaching in excess of 21,000 feet per minute.
That's almost the speed of sound, and more than 150 kilometers an hour faster than this plane was designed to withstand.
It's rolling over rapid descent. They can't recover now.
At that speed, the plane is no longer able to hold itself together.
And that sound, that's the sound of the plane coming apart.
The black boxes have revealed how Flight 574 crashed. But they also raise crucial questions.
It's just one error after another.
There was ample opportunity, ample time for the pilots to correct the situation.
The investigators have come to a disturbing conclusion. The only mechanical failure was with the plane's navigation system. And that shouldn't have caused the crash. The more significant failures were human.
Okay, put the IRS in attitude.
But why should qualified pilots make these disastrous mistakes?
Don't turn it! This is our heading!
To find these answers, investigators must look at the airline itself. This one accident will raise serious questions about Indonesia's entire aviation industry. Investigators turn their attention from the actions of the pilots on Flight 574 to the airline that employed them, Adam Air. They meet with the owners.
Front wings.
Adam Air was founded in 2002 by a wealthy businesswoman named Sandra Ang. Ang named the airline after her son, Adam, whom she also appointed as the company's president.
We need to know more about your training program.
The investigators interview Adam Air pilots.
Did the airline provide any training on recovery procedures in the event of an IRS failure? No.
They want to find out more about how the airline trained its flight crews.
What about recovery techniques? IRS troubleshooting? No?
What they uncover is disturbing.
We could not find any evidence that the pilot was properly trained when they have a sudden disengaging autopilot or when they're flying with the IRS failure.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your time.
As they dig deeper, investigators find an airline plagued with safety issues. 11 months before the Adam Air crash, in February 2006, another Adam Air plane, Flight 782, flew off course the same way as Flight 574. That crew was also getting faulty navigation data. But they couldn't even reach controllers on the radio. They couldn't get directions. They were badly lost for 3 hours.
The crew was trying to find where they were. The ATC was trying to find where they were. And they were over the water.
Like Flight 574, they had a malfunctioning IRS. In the end, the plane landed almost 500 kilometers south of where it should have been.
They just continued until they found an island. And it had an airport in it, and they said, okay, we have to land there, otherwise we don't know where we're going to go. And they landed, and they didn't know exactly where they were until they landed.
6 months after Flight 574, the European Commission banned all Indonesian airlines from flying to Europe.
That sent a very strong message to the whole world that we, the European Union, believe that all Indonesian airlines are unsafe and you should not fly on them.
Then in March 2008, there's another accident involving Adam Air, this time in the city of Batam.
And the airplane slewed off the runway, came to rest on the side. The evacuation was a bit strange. Nose lights were deployed, and that was the final accident. And after that, I think everybody said, enough's enough, you know.
People who did care, people who were wanting to shake up the industry and reform it and improve it, were horrified that the situation had been so bad within Adam Air and that the authorities had allowed such a situation to continue and deteriorate.
Immediately after the crash in Batam, the Indonesian government suspended and then ultimately revoked Adam Air's license to operate. It is also apparent that Adam Air isn't the only Indonesian airline with problems.
Prior to the Adam Air crash, Indonesia experienced a bad crash about every year to 18 months.
Many of those accidents involved the discount carriers that the government had allowed to thrive. More than 50 such airlines were in operation at the time of the Adam Air crash.
The problem, though, was that this expansion occurred in a way that was not properly monitored, not properly regulated by the government. Thousands and thousands of people are being employed to work for airlines when they just don't have the experience to do so and are not being adequately trained, as the investigation report into the Adam Air crash demonstrated.
Indonesia's poor safety record forces the government to take steps to improve airline safety throughout the country. It begins rating airlines on safety. and grounds those that don't comply. There have been fewer fatal incidents since the reforms. But a year and a half after it was put in place, the European Union's ban on Indonesian airlines was still in effect. Those familiar with Indonesian aviation think the reforms could go even further.
So that we have no more ADMS, we have no more companies that cut costs too much and gives all these extra risks to the public, because that's not what the public should receive. The public should receive a reliable and safe means of air transportation.